I'm here with Blake Hutchison, the CEO of Flipper.com, which is the world's leading marketplace for small online businesses. And this is going to be a little bit of a unique kind of interview because I think, we're a community of biohackers, and I believe that buying existing businesses is one of the ultimate hacks to the objective of starting your own business or having your own business, which is very trendy at the moment, and has a lot of kind of pitfalls. So does that make sense for you, Blake? What are your thoughts on that to start with?
Yeah, I mean, firstly, super interesting topic because it's alive and well right now, this concept of starting your own business, getting ahead, owning your own future, investing your own subject matter expertise so that you can get growth versus necessarily giving that growth to somebody else. So yeah, super relevant and great to be here. Okay,
so what we're going to do is we're going to talk through a few different scenarios, based on, let's say, savings of our audience. Okay, so I guess we start with, I don't have any cash to invest. I don't have any savings. How can I get something done, or what would you recommend that how someone should proceed with no cash?
Well, firstly, if you've got no cash, don't quit your day job. So that would be my first tip. My second tip would be probably counter to what you and I are speaking about today, right? If you don't have any cash, then it is a good time to start something because it's cost effective to do so, more cost effective than ever before. And I would choose a platform where I don't have to spend money to acquire customers because that platform is already full of them. So what am I talking about? I think I'm talking about an Amazon, fulfilled by Amazon store. Mm-hmm. So I'd set up on Shopify to create a brand. I'd do some keyword research around popular products that people are looking to buy right now. I'd jump on Alibaba to find a good quality product, and I'd start to get a few samples my way. And then I'd set up on Amazon and start to play around with Amazon FBA and see if I can pick up my first 100 customers. And to pick up my first 100 customers, I'd contact absolutely everyone in my LinkedIn network.
Nice. Okay, so that's a surprise because I thought what you were going to say was raise some cash from friends and family.
Yeah, okay. It's interesting. So I would raise some cash with friends and family, but only after I had a little bit of traction.
Okay. So you would on the zero level, you would start with an own startup. And
yeah, I think you put a couple of $100 into setting up and you actually test the market, right? Once you've tested the market, maybe it's a couple of $100, maybe you tap out at $1,000 to acquire your first 10 customers. At that point, then go and tell everyone about it and raise a little bit of money.
Okay, very nice, very nice.
A little bit of money is different for each person, right?
Yeah. Okay, so let's say now that we have 20K in the bank available to experiment with. What would you do with 20K?
That's interesting. So maybe you can find a couple of friends, and maybe you can take that to 100K to give yourself a little bit more buying power. Because let's face it, a $100,000 business will typically be a more reliable business than a $20,000 business.
Okay.
It's probably been around for a little bit longer. It's got a little more traction. You can understand the operational pros and cons of the asset at a 100K level versus a 20K level. But let's say I couldn't do that. I would be trying to acquire something at around a maximum 2 times net profit multiple.
Yeah.
So I'd be trying to acquire something at $10,000. Given it's $20,000, I don't necessarily have a huge amount of money left over to acquire customers necessarily. So I'd be looking for a blog which was generating revenue from either affiliate commissions connected to a affiliate program. Again, the Amazon Associates program is a good one. Or maybe it's driving AdSense revenue powered by Google. And maybe most of the traffic is organic. In which case, I might be able to run that asset just in the same way it's running right now. My return is likely to be 40 to 50% if it's running at the current levels it's running right now, which is great. And in turn, I still keep my day job because maybe I'm not quite earning enough yet, but it's great supplementary income.
Okay.
So that is, I guess, two scenarios.
Okay. And the interesting thing I picked up in one of your interviews was that the average sale price of an asset on Flipper is 25K. So around the 20K mark, we're talking the bulk of the kind of volume that you guys see. And
correct.
Sorry?
That's correct. It's blown out in July. Positively, it's blown out in July to $89,000 is the average.
Average sale value in July was 89K. Okay.
That's correct. But you're right. What we've seen historically is 25. And of course, that's because we have a long tail. We have lots of low value assets and we have fewer higher value assets. And so you get that long tail, and therefore 25K is about right.
Okay. And so on the 25K range, can you just explain to the audience about the multiple side of things, how that works, what it means?
Yeah. Let's pick some easy mathematics. Let's say I'm making $500 a month net profit. Let's say that's very consistent. So therefore I'm making $6,000 net profit per month. Per annum.
Yeah.
And let's say I go and acquire that for $15,000. Okay. So I'm looking at approximately 2.5 times, right? And I continue to run that to the same level. I'll be getting a 40% return on my investment. So if I run that to the exact same level, I'll be getting a 40% return on my investment. Mm-hmm. So that's what we talk about. And that assumes that you've bought something that you also believe there is substantial opportunity in. So you run it at the current level, you'll get a 40% ROI, which will beat almost any other asset class. Mm-hmm. That's the great news about all of this stuff, right?
Important to know, because people are going to be, wanting to buy an apartment and the usual investment classes, and so
Alex, would you prefer to own $1 million worth of digital real estate or $1 million worth of property?
Yeah. It's a no-brainer. But on the other hand, the reason for that boost in ROI is because there's a bit more risk in these kinds of assets.
Correct.
Okay, but if you're putting your life, your energy, passion into it, then the world should be yours, because you've already started from a running start, not from a stop start, and trying to figure out how to catch that profit, which is what it's all about.
Yep, I've been an entrepreneur before. I think you have too, Alex, and it's really tough when you start from zero.
Yeah.
You've got to learn everything from scratch. You've got to build a market for yourself, but that's the whole point about acquisition entrepreneurship. You're actually buying something with traction, and you get to assess that traction and understand what you can do to expand on that existing traction, which is a great place to be in.
Okay, so we've covered the 20K range. Now let's sort of double that or so, go to 50K. We have 50K in the bank. What would you do? Would you buy one? Would you repeat the process, or would you buy a couple of different smaller things? How would you approach that?
So what is really interesting, and I'm getting off topic just a little bit, but what is really interesting is we have some buyers on Flipper with very large budgets. $1 million to spend, $5 million to spend. And even those individuals will tend to buy multiple assets versus one. Mm-hmm. And that's because you can tend to get an aggregation of benefit, a cumulative benefit from working on multiple assets, as long as they're in a similar niche or supporting a similar business model. So with that in mind, if I had $50,000, I'm either likely, same scenario, I'm either likely to borrow and try to use $50,000 as 10% security, so borrow up to $500,000, so that I can acquire a higher performing collection of assets, 2 or 3 probably, at $500,000. Or if for whatever reason I don't have the risk appetite to do that, I would be trying to find probably two assets of a very similar size, $25,000 each, trading at maybe, depending on the business model, let's say it's e-commerce. If it's e-commerce, I'd be paying maximum 2.2 times net profit multiple. And my preference is not drop ship, but some people have great experience with drop ship stores. I prefer to control the product and the customer experience end to end, just because of that's my personality type probably. So I'd try to buy 2 e-commerce stores that were maybe 2 to 3 years old each, that weren't spending money on marketing, that had a unique product. So for example, there was a site that sold on Flipper very recently in the plus size fashion industry. Plus size fashion only. And the great thing about plus size is you are talking about a niche. There's lots of people who sell dresses. There's lots of people who sell swimwear. But there's fewer people in the plus size industry. So I'd try and find 2 e-commerce assets equally matched on price in a strong niche.
Very nice. And what you raised there in that answer was also another hack, which was the hack of leverage. Of using what you have to borrow more in order to get more bang for your buck, which is the same principle that's used in real estate investing. You pay the small down payment, the property appreciates in value. What are the vehicles that you're seeing for that kind of borrowing on Flipper or in your world? What's the approach?
Yeah, so I think there's a few things. Let's go through financing in general. So the most common way to finance an asset is seller financing. So seller financing is where the seller is essentially the bank, okay? So I agree that I'm going to buy your asset, Alex, and I'm going to buy your asset at $100,000, but I only have $75,000 to give you today. Are you willing to take the additional $25,000 paid over 12 months with 7.5% interest? You may be willing to do that as the current owner of the asset because you recognize that the 7.5% interest gives you greater value for the asset that you're trading. And I, as the buyer, am interested in doing that because I get to protect cash flow. My down payment is 75 versus 100, therefore 75% of the asset value. And I back myself in to continue to get the returns that the asset's currently pitched at and that I've done my due diligence around and believe and have verified. And so I have confidence in my ability to repay. So it's seller financing. The next thing we see is obviously SBA, Small Business Administration. And that's typically relevant for a US-based asset and a US-based buyer. Most typically. It's not to say it can't be achieved, but most typically. And that, of course, is where the Small Business Administration, which is a federal department, is assisting a bank to finance typically actually growth capital. So the acquisition of machinery, staff, marketing. In this particular case, it's obviously used for the acquisition of a business. And SBA is common and good right now because the rates are very, very favourable. Very, very favourable. And of course, now you've got a whole heap of people playing in the growth capital space. Clearbank, CLEARBANC.com, Clearbank, and they're providing growth capital. It's not a loan per se, it's growth capital. Very, very strong. There are also search funds And of course, as you've mentioned a couple of times, there's friends and family. And if you can present the financials well enough, if you've got strong connections who are willing and understand digital economics, then you can find yourself with a friends and family loan at either reasonable rates or cut them in on the deal and they take equity in the asset as well. Now, of course, the good thing right now is, excuse me, if you are talking about a 30 to 40% annualized return, well, then cash is cheap, right? Because even if you're paying 5%, even if you're paying 7.5%, 10% in interest, if the asset has some age to it and you can verify the historical data, get some sense of seasonality, you should have a pretty good sense of how that asset's going to perform once you take it over. Now, that assumes that you've got the skill set. It assumes that the person who is running it wasn't some marketing whiz kid and you somehow have to match up to their own capability. You want to be buying something which you understand and invest in the time and effort to run that at the same level that it was being run previously.
But even if you're going into something that you're not so familiar with or new areas, at least you have a better bet. The risk is, the odds are higher because it's already performing rather than getting it working with all the same kind of constraints of like having to figure everything out. So
cash flow.
Yeah, cash flow. Okay, so let's jump up. So that's what you do. Okay, if you had 50K and you've given a few paths to leveraging that 50K into more to be able to acquire something bigger. On the 100K side, okay, what same process, just scaled up, I guess.
Yeah, I think a similar process. I think the business model choice starts to change a little bit at 100K. I'd probably be looking. I'd see if I can find a small SaaS business for $100,000.
Nice.
I don't think you're going to find a SaaS business that has a good history of performance at 25,000 or 50,000.
Yeah.
But at 100,000, you could. My opinion is you could find a small SaaS business. Remember that the multiples are higher, so you're going to be paying a little bit more. So the business probably isn't earning as much, which means to get a good quality, viable business earning maybe, let's say, $30,000 to $45,000 in annual recurring revenue. At $100,000 to spend, I'd be looking at a SaaS business instead.
Okay, and let me bring it back to the main one of the main interests or passions of our audience, which is health, health and wellness.
Yes.
Okay, so maybe we should have said that at the beginning, but the ideas we're talking about here can be applied to a specific category. If you're passionate about health, you want to do something in the health sector, find a health business to buy. What insights do you have in the health category?
So right now we are seeing extraordinary amount of buyer demand for the category. So it's in our top 5 most searched terms.
What?
Which means that competition is high right now. Health.
Okay.
Health. So like you and your community, there's lots of other people interested, which is interesting because that may mean that the value of the asset gets pushed up slightly. I think probably the other thing is that it's harder to find a good quality health asset right now because they tend to be doing well through this period of time. And if they're doing super well, it tends to be that sellers, for all the wrong reasons actually, don't want to be selling. But it's actually the perfect time to be selling if you own a health asset because there's lots of demand, so you can tend to get a somewhat of competitive process playing out. What would I do? I'd probably look for something which had a global following or at least multiple geographies, because I think we're in a time of uncertainty, and so you want to hedge your bets per se and get something which has got strong geographic distribution. I think the other thing is gyms are less common now, and there's more outdoor activity. So I'd be looking at an app, most likely, that is orientating around community, challenges, video content, the ability to measure yourself against others. There's lots of apps like that. There's a few apps like that trying to sell on Flipper right now, actually. I think that's a really interesting space. And I would aim, we've seen great health apps which are targeting gym instructors and things like that. I'd be aiming for something which is direct to consumer and targeting end users versus something that might be operating at the enterprise level or going after clubs or gyms for obvious reasons. I hope that provides some level of insight. But it's certainly a very popular topic right now.
Absolutely, and one thing I'd like to highlight is that this conversation, is not super tied to current circumstances. This is like a lifetime initiative. The corona is just a blip in that in the timeline, in some ways. So this is something that you could start thinking about now. Start shopping around. Start opening some conversations, learning, looking for the thing that you want to dedicate, a significant amount of your life to. One of the things from my personal experience about this is that, I have lots of ideas, I have lots of creativity and things that I want to see in the world. This methodology about buying something is the perfect platform from which to create those ideas instead of having to do them, like we said, from a stop-start. You come into something which is already working, that has a customer list, has track record, a brand, and inject your ideas through that. So
that's right. That's exactly right. There is just as an example, there's an asset right now which is super interesting in this space that you may want to take a look at, that your community may be interested in. But essentially it is, as I was speaking about before, it's about challenges. So you and your friends download the app.
Is that Vimify?
And Vimify.
Yeah, that's my friend.
That's the name I was looking for. That's your friends. Okay,
I referred him to Flipper.
Fantastic. Good man. That's a good-looking asset.
It is.
That's a good-looking asset.
It's really beautiful. What's the price at now? 60?
So he's got an asking price of 85, which is a 3.1 times net profit multiple, but it's been around for 5 years. It's doing 2,500 per month. It's got a strong community. It's growing.
Let's talk about this. Let's talk about this from my point of view. I came across it a few years ago as it was the Flow Research Collective. They were running their coaching program through this app. Okay, so basically, you as a coach, you create your coaching systems through the app, and then people sign in and go through the steps and do everything. I came across it through that. I was like, that's a really cool app. Then I'm in Los Angeles and I meet Ben, and he's like, you know what? It's been great, but I'd really like to kind of move on. Or so he's trying to sell that, and it's like got decent revenue, decent profit. Not much work, and it's the perfect case study of something, if you're a biohacker, if you're a coach, if you have a vision, put your vision through this kind of thing. So how do people find that on Flipper? They can search Vimify?
Yeah, they can search Vimify, they can search health and wellness or health, and it will pop up. The really interesting thing about that is when people buy an asset, and when people are looking at assets, yes, obviously, pay due respect to the way that the asset is currently making money and the way the asset currently works. But also think about ancillary revenue streams. Also think about new opportunities leveraging the existing community.
Yeah.
And so when I look at something like Vimify, I think less about coaches and I think more about challenges. So I think about this whole group of running clubs, this whole group of people who might challenge each other to run 100 kilometers in a month, and you can set up a quick group. And then I think about prizes and I think about competitions and donations. So imagine using something like Vimify to create the ultimate running competition where you pay a small fee, let's say $5, to prove that you can run 500 kilometers in a month faster than anyone else who's using the entire Vimify app. Mm-hmm. And so all these other people start paying $5 to contest, right? And then one winner gets like 75% of the competition prize pool, and Vimify as the company takes the rest, right? Because that's the ticket to play.
Nice.
And I'm just making.
You've been thinking about this.
But you get my point, right? The point is that the great thing about digital assets is it's performing today.
Yeah.
How's it going to perform in the future?
Yeah. Great. Okay, look, that's been awesome. Let's go for a wrap up. What, in conclusion, for an average, health-related person looking for a career change, etc., what is the next step? What would be the step-by-step to get rolling in this?
Yeah. So number one, browse and get familiar with the types of assets available, specifically in the health category, and get yourself across valuations. So,
yes. And one thing quickly, how do you protect the downsides? How do you not make sure that you don't lose money or that your risks are calculated and managed?
Don't buy something that has only been around for 6 months.
Okay. Aged.
Now, people do that and they have success with it, but it's a certain type of individual that has success with that asset. My recommendation is if you're buying your first piece of digital real estate, then you should be buying something with age. So 1 year plus, preferably 2 or 3 if you've got the money. But of course,
the price goes up.
Price goes up.
Yeah.
So piece one, get familiar with valuations. And what that means is look at the monthly revenue data, look at the monthly expense data, look at the monthly net profit, multiply that by 12, look at the asking price and get some sense of whether the seller is realistic or not. They need to be reasonable before you want to play ball anyway. Secondly, look at seasonality. You need to be able to assess a good period of time to understand whether at the point at which you are looking at the asset, it's going through a downturn or it's going through an upturn, or even better, if it's consistently been flat, that's a consistently well-performing business and a good business to buy.
Mm-hmm. You don't want any big spikes or drops. It's a warning sign.
Yeah, that's right. There's often a reason why something's flying, and similarly, there's a reason why something's declining. The other thing is, remember, turnarounds are hard. So when something's decreasing by 10%, it may seem like a small amount, but when you take it over, it's also likely to decrease by 10%. Mm-hmm. On the flip side, if something's increasing consistently by 10%, then when you take it over, it's also likely to increase by 10%. So I would think about that. The next thing is I would place a safe bet. So you and I talked about 0, and we talked about 25, and we talked about 50, and we talked about 100. Regardless of what you have, that's not necessarily how much you should spend.
Don't bet the farm.
Don't bet the farm. We've got great studies of great case studies of people spending $5,000 and turning that around to become $550,000. Mm. We've got people who have done that, $25,000, turned it to $250,000. Now, some of those individuals who I've met had plenty of money to begin with anyway, but they didn't bet the farm. They placed a safe bet. They leveraged the traction the asset already had, and they reinvested whatever else they've got in understanding the business, marketing, and driving new customers through that asset. Probably my tips.
Great. Okay, well, thank you so much for your work and your, tangible passion for the field. Really appreciate it on behalf of our audience as well. We will share some resources for further introspection, etc., further research. And thank you for your contribution.
Thank you, Alex. Great to chat.
Cheers.